The day I heard Patricia Davenport pounding on my front door during the worst ice storm Texas had seen in decades. I knew my peaceful life in the Pinewood Hills subdivision of Austin was about to become a nightmare. I had just checked on my backup generator, a beautiful Generac 22 kW unit I'd installed 3 years ago after watching my neighbors freeze during the last power outage. The machine hummed steadily in its weatherproof enclosure beside my house, keeping my heat running, my food cold, and my family comfortable while the rest of the neighborhood sat in darkness. Ice coated everything outside, turning the streets into skating rinks and snapping power lines like twigs. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees, and the forecast said it would get worse before it got better. My name is Connor Foster, and I'm a telecommunications engineer who works from home. My wife Rachel and our 2 kids, Emma and Jake, ages 8 and 6, were huddled in the living room watching a movie when Patricia started her assault on my door. I should have pretended we weren't home. "Connor Foster, I know you're in there. I can see your lights on." Patricia's shrill voice cut through the howling wind. I opened the door to find her standing there in a purple puffer coat, her frosted blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was 52 years old and had been president of the Pinewood Hills HOA for the past 4 years, a position she wielded like a medieval warlord with a sword. "Patricia, what are you doing out in this weather? It's dangerous. Don't you dare lecture me about safety when you're sitting here in your heated house while the rest of us freeze." Her face was red, whether from cold or anger I couldn't tell. "That generator of yours needs to be shared with the community." I blinked at her. "Excuse me, you heard me. The HOA bylaws clearly state that residents must act in the best interest of the community. Your generator can power multiple homes, and it's selfish and unconscionable for you to keep it all to yourself. Patricia, my generator is sized for my house. It's running my heating system, refrigerator, and essential circuits. It's not capable of powering the entire neighborhood." "I'm not asking you to power the entire neighborhood," she snapped, pushing past me into my foyer. "But Mrs. Henderson next door is 83 years old. The Robinsons have a newborn baby. The Chens have medical equipment that needs power. You have a moral obligation to help them." Rachel appeared from the living room, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. "Patricia, we understand it's difficult out there, but Connor's right. Our generator isn't set up to power multiple homes. The electrical load would overload the system. Then you need to rotate it, run it at your house for a few hours, then move it to the next house, then the next." Patricia crossed her arms. "I've already drawn up a schedule. Each household gets 4 hours of generator time per day, starting with the most vulnerable residents. You want me to disconnect my generator and physically move it from house to house in an ice storm?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Not to mention it's a permanent installation. It's connected to my natural gas line and wired into my electrical panel through a transfer switch. You can't just unplug it and roll it down the street. Then you need to run extension cords to the other houses. Patricia, that's insane. My generator is rated for my house's load. If I start running heavy-duty extension cords to other houses and people start plugging in space heaters and electric blankets, it will overload the generator and damage it, or worse, cause a fire." Her eyes narrowed. "So you're refusing to help your neighbors in a time of crisis?" "I'm not refusing to help. I'm explaining why what you're asking is physically impossible and dangerous." I kept my voice calm, though my patience was wearing thin. "Look, I have extra blankets and sleeping bags. People are welcome to come stay here where it's warm until the power comes back on. We can probably fit 10 or 12 people comfortably. That's not good enough. We need power in our own homes. Then people should have prepared and gotten their own generators. Patricia's face went from red to purple. How dare you? Not everyone can afford a fancy backup generator system. Some of us live on fixed incomes. I saved for 3 years to buy this generator. I made it a priority because I learned from the last outage. This isn't some luxury toy, Patricia. It's emergency preparedness equipment that I purchased with my own money for my own family. Everything in this neighborhood is community property according to the HOA covenants, she said, pulling out her phone. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. We'll see what the other board members have to say about your selfish attitude. It's 9 o'clock at night during an ice storm, Patricia. Go home before you get hurt out here. She jabbed her finger at me. This isn't over, Connor Foster, not by a long shot. She turned and carefully picked her way down my icy front steps, nearly slipping twice before reaching her car. Rachel closed the door and looked at me with worried eyes. She's going to make trouble for us. Let her try. She can't force me to destroy my generator or risk burning down houses because she doesn't understand how electrical systems work. But I underestimated Patricia Davenport's capacity for vindictive petness. The next morning, the ice storm had intensified. The power company estimated it would be at least 5 days before electricity was restored to our area. Tree branches heavy with ice were crashing down all over the neighborhood. The streets were completely impassable. My generator continued its faithful service, keeping us warm and safe. At 10 in the morning, someone knocked on my door again. This time it was Richard Chen from 3 houses down. He looked exhausted and worried. Connor, I'm sorry to bother you, but do you have power for a CPAP machine? My wife has severe sleep apnea, and she hasn't been able to use her machine for 2 nights now. She's not doing well. Of course, Richard, bring her over. She can sleep in our guest room and we'll plug in her machine. Relief flooded his face. Thank you so much. Patricia told us you refused to help anyone, but I didn't believe her. My jaw tightened. Patricia asked me to do something impossible and dangerous. I'm happy to help in ways that are actually safe and practical. Bring your wife over whenever you're ready. And bring whatever you need to be comfortable for a few days. Within an hour, the Chens were set up in our guest room. Margaret Chen was able to take a nap with her CPAP running, and Richard nearly cried with gratitude. Word spread quickly, and by afternoon we had the elderly Mrs. Henderson camped out on our sofa, the Robinsons with their 6-week-old baby in Emma's room, and the Kowalskis, who had 3 young kids, spread out in our finished basement with sleeping bags. My house had become a refugee shelter, and Rachel was amazing, organizing meal schedules and making sure everyone had what they needed. The kids thought it was a big adventure, playing with the Kowalski children and helping Rachel make sandwiches for everyone. Then Patricia showed up again at 4 in the afternoon with a man I recognized as Howard Burke, the HOA vice president, and Sandra Mitchell, the HOA secretary. All 3 of them were dressed like they were heading to a business meeting, not navigating a natural disaster. Connor Foster, we need to speak with you officially, Patricia announced when I opened the door. I'm kind of busy taking care of 11 extra people in my house right now, Patricia. The HOA board has voted, and we are formally demanding that you provide power to the homes of HOA residents using your generator. If you refuse, we will be forced to take legal action. I looked at Howard and Sandra. You 2 are seriously backing this. Howard shifted uncomfortably. Patricia makes some valid points about community responsibility. Did she also explain that what she's asking would damage my generator and create serious fire hazards? We're not interested in your excuses, Patricia cut in. This is your final warning. Either comply with the HOA's directive, or we will seek an emergency injunction forcing you to comply. An injunction during an ice storm. Good luck finding a judge who's even at work right now. Judge Whitmore lives in Pinewood Hills, Patricia said with a nasty smile. He's 3 streets over, and he's also without power. I'm sure he'll be very sympathetic to our position once he understands how you're hoarding resources while your neighbors suffer. Judge Whitmore is welcome to come stay here too. We've got room in the basement. Your flippant attitude is noted for the record. Patricia held up her phone, and I realized she was recording this. You are officially refusing a lawful order from your homeowners association. I'm refusing an unlawful order that would put lives and property at risk. There's a difference. We'll let the courts decide that. Patricia turned on her heel and her little entourage followed her back to her car. Rachel came up behind me. She's actually going to sue you over this. Looks that way. Can she do that? She can try. Whether she'll win is another question. I closed the door and went back to helping Mr. Kowalski set up a charging station for everyone's phones and devices using power strips connected to my living room outlets. That evening, I got an email from Patricia with the subject line, Notice of Emergency HOA Action. The email contained a formal letter demanding I provide equitable access to generator power for all HOA residents, and stating that my refusal to comply with HOA directives constituted a violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that governed our neighborhood. The letter threatened daily fines of $500 until I complied and stated that the HOA was pursuing emergency legal remedies to protect the health and safety of residents. I forwarded the email to my friend Derek, who was a real estate attorney, with a note. Is this legal? Can the HOA actually do this? His response came an hour later. Call me when you can. This is wild. I stepped into my garage where it was quieter and called him. Connor, I've read through this twice and I'm blown away, Derek said. The HOA has no legal authority to commandeer your private property. None. The CC and Articas govern things like exterior paint colors, fence heights, and lawn maintenance. They don't give the HOA the right to seize or require you to share your personal emergency equipment. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy. You're not crazy. Patricia Davenport is. Has she actually filed a lawsuit yet? She's threatening to get an emergency injunction. She won't get it. No judge is going to force you to damage your own property or create safety hazards. And even if she finds a judge willing to hear an emergency petition during an ice storm, which I doubt, you have a solid defense. Your generator is your private property. You have no legal obligation to share it, any more than you'd be required to share your car or your television. What about the fines she's threatening? Completely unenforceable. She's pulling that out of thin air. Save all her communications, document everything, and if she actually files suit, I'll represent you. This is the kind of HOA overreach that makes for great case law. I felt better after talking to Derek, but the situation was far from over. The ice storm continued for 3 more days. The power company's estimates kept getting pushed back as crews struggled to repair the massive damage to the electrical grid. My generator ran continuously, burning through natural gas but keeping my expanded household warm and functional. We fell into a routine. Rachel and Mrs. Henderson cooked meals for everyone using our stove. The kids did puzzles and played board games, and the adults took turns keeping the little ones entertained while parents caught up on sleep. Margaret Chen's health improved dramatically once she could use her CPAP regularly. Baby Robinson stopped crying constantly now that her formula could be properly refrigerated, and her parents could heat bottles reliably. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been shivering alone in her dark house, regained her color and energy. My house was crowded and chaotic, but it felt good to help people who actually needed it. Patricia, meanwhile, was busy being a menace. On the third day of the outage, she went house to house with a clipboard, conducting what she called a neighborhood survey about generator usage. Several of my neighbors later told me she'd been asking leading questions like, "Don't you think it's unfair that Connor Foster has power while you suffer? And would you support HOA action to ensure equitable distribution of emergency resources?" She also posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, though her attempt at turning people against me backfired spectacularly. Her post read, "It has come to the HOA's attention that one resident has a functioning backup generator but refuses to share this resource with neighbors in need. While some of you suffer in the cold and dark, this individual sits comfortably in his heated home, unwilling to help his community. The HOA is taking action to remedy this selfish behavior and ensure fair treatment for all residents." The comments were not what she expected. Sarah Williams wrote, "Connor and Rachel have been housing people in their home. My mother-in-law is staying there right now, and she's being treated like family." "What are you talking about?" Marcus Thompson added. "Connor invited my family to stay with him, but we decided to tough it out at home. He even brought us a box of supplies and hand warmers. Where's this refusal to help you're talking about, Patricia?" Jennifer Rodriguez posted. "My husband is an electrician, and I showed him Patricia's demands. He said what she's asking Connor to do would be dangerous and likely illegal. You can't just run extension cords willy-nilly to power whole houses. That's how you start fires." Even Judge Whitmore's wife commented, "My husband and I have been managing fine with extra blankets and our fireplace. We certainly don't expect our neighbors to damage their own property to accommodate us. This seems like a gross overreach of HOA authority." Patricia deleted the entire post within 2 hours, but screenshots had already circulated. The court of public opinion was decidedly not on her side. But Patricia wasn't deterred. On the fourth day, she showed up again, this time with a different approach. "Connor, I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said when I answered the door. Her voice was syrupy sweet, and alarm bells immediately went off in my head. "I can see you've been helping some people, and that's wonderful. Really, it is. But there are still many residents who need assistance. Patricia, what do you want? I have a proposal. What if the HOA reimburses you for the natural gas you're using, and in exchange, you provide power to a few specific homes? We'd limit it to just the most vulnerable residents, and we'd control the electrical load to make sure nothing gets damaged. Who is we in this scenario? The HOA would oversee the operation to ensure fairness and safety." Patricia, I appreciate that you're trying to find a solution, but the answer is still no. My generator isn't designed for what you're proposing, and I'm not comfortable with the HOA, which has no electrical engineering expertise, overseeing anything related to my home's power system. The sweet mask slipped. "You're making a big mistake, Connor. We already have a lawsuit drafted. We were hoping to resolve this amicably, but if you insist on being obstinate, we'll file it the moment the courts reopen. Then I guess I'll see you in court." She left, and I went back inside to find Richard Chen looking concerned. He'd overheard the conversation from the living room. "Connor, I don't want our staying here to cause problems for you with the HOA." "You're not causing problems, Richard. Patricia is. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to let her bully me into doing something stupid and dangerous just because she's on a power trip. Still, if you need us to leave." "I don't. You're welcome here as long as you need to be." I clapped him on the shoulder. Besides, your wife makes incredible dumplings. Rachel and I are eating better than we have in months." That got a laugh out of him, and the tension broke. The power finally came back on after 6 days. It was rolling at first, different neighborhoods getting electricity in waves as the grid stabilized. Pinewood Hills got power back on day 7, around 3 in the afternoon. People cheered in the streets. Families who'd been staying with us gathered their things and headed home with tearful thanks and promises to have us over for dinner once things settled down. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. Patricia had lost the battle for public opinion. The crisis was over, and surely she'd move on to some other HOA crusade. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the ice storm ended, I received a certified letter. Patricia and the HOA were suing me for willful violation of HOA covenants, failure to act in the community's best interest during an emergency, and causing emotional distress to residents through negligent hoarding of essential resources. They were seeking $25,000 in damages plus legal fees. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the lawsuit, unable to believe what I was reading. "This is insane," Rachel said, reading over my shoulder. "Negligent hoarding. You helped 11 people. You used your own resources to keep them safe. Logic isn't Patricia's strong suit." I picked up my phone and called Derek. He was equally incredulous when I read him the lawsuit. "She actually filed this. I honestly didn't think she'd go through with it." "She did. What do we do?" "We fight it and we win. Connor, this is a frivolous lawsuit. I'm going to file a motion to dismiss, and I'm also going to recommend you countersue for legal fees and harassment. Patricia has crossed a line here. I don't want to drag this out forever. It won't take forever. This is such clear-cut HOA overreach that I'd be shocked if it survives the motion to dismiss. But you need to start documenting everything. I need statements from everyone who stayed at your house during the storm. I need records of all your communications with Patricia. I need photos of your generator setup. I need everything." Over the next week, I gathered evidence. The Chens, the Robinsons, the Kowalskis, and Mrs. Henderson all provided detailed written statements about how I'd helped them. Margaret Chen's statement was particularly powerful, describing how her inability to use her CPAP had been causing dangerous oxygen level drops, and how staying at my house potentially saved her life. I also compiled screenshots of the neighborhood Facebook discussion, copies of all Patricia's emails and recordings of our doorstep conversations where she'd been recording, and a detailed technical explanation from an electrician friend about why Patricia's demands would have been dangerous and impractical. Derek filed our response along with a motion to dismiss, arguing that the HOA had no legal standing to sue me for how I used my private property during an emergency. He also filed a countersuit against the HOA for abuse of process and sought to recover my legal fees. The local news caught wind of the story. A reporter named Jennifer Hastings from Kazan reached out, wanting to interview me about the generator lawsuit, as it was being called. After consulting with Derek, I agreed. The interview aired on the evening news. Jennifer was fair and balanced, presenting both sides of the story. She interviewed me at my house, showing my generator setup and letting me explain why Patricia's demands had been impossible. She also interviewed Patricia, who came across as defensive and entitled, insisting that community needs must come before individual property rights. But the kicker was when Jennifer interviewed an electrical engineer who explained in simple terms why running extension cords from house to house during an emergency was a recipe for disaster. What Miss Davenport was asking Mr. Foster to do could have resulted in electrical fires, damaged equipment, or even electrocution, the engineer said. Mr. Foster's refusal likely prevented a tragedy. The story went viral locally. Within days, it had been picked up by state news outlets, then national ones. Suddenly, I was getting interview requests from CNN, Fox News, and various online media outlets. The story hit a nerve. Overreaching HOAs were a popular villain, and the image of me sheltering nearly a dozen people in my home while being sued for not doing enough played very well in the court of public opinion. Patricia and the HOA board were getting roasted online. The national HOA oversight organizations issued statements supporting my position. An attorney who specialized in HOA law wrote an op-ed in the Austin American-Statesman calling the lawsuit one of the most egregious examples of HOA overreach I've encountered in 30 years of practice. I tried to stay out of the media circus as much as possible, but it was everywhere. My neighbors were supportive, most of them, but a few sided with Patricia. The neighborhood became divided between the pro-Connor and pro-HOA factions, which was exactly the kind of drama I'd hoped to avoid. The court date for Derek's motion to dismiss was set for 6 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. In the meantime, Patricia escalated her campaign against me in other ways. I received a notice that I was being fined $200 for excessive noise from my generator during the ice storm. The notice cited an HOA rule about mechanical equipment that produces noise audible from neighboring properties. Derek laughed when I showed him the notice. "She's retaliating and she's creating more evidence for our countersuit. Don't pay the fine. We'll add this to our case." A week later, I got another notice, this time for $500, claiming my generator enclosure violated the HOA's architectural guidelines because I hadn't submitted proper plans for approval before installation. This was ridiculous because I'd installed the generator 3 years earlier, had submitted all the required paperwork, and had received written approval from the HOA board at that time. I still had the approval letter in my files. "She's digging herself deeper," Derek said when I showed him that notice too. "This is harassment, and it's going to blow up in her face." The motion to dismiss hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in late March. The ice storm felt like ancient history now, with spring flowers blooming and temperatures in the 70s. I sat next to Derek at the plaintiff's table while Patricia, Howard, and Sandra sat with their attorney, a nervous-looking young man named Timothy Brooks, who seemed to realize he'd been handed a losing case. Judge Carol Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, read through both sides' briefs before the hearing even started. When she looked up, she did not look pleased. "Mr. Brooks, I've read your complaint, and I'm struggling to find any legal basis for this lawsuit. Would you like to enlighten me?" Timothy Brooks stood, tugging at his collar. "Your Honor, the HOA's position is that the covenants require residents to act in the best interest of the community. During a severe emergency, Mr. Foster had resources that could have helped numerous residents, but he refused to share those resources, causing suffering to his neighbors. Did Mr. Foster have a legal obligation to share his personal property? The HOA believes that the community interest supersedes individual property rights in emergency situations." "The HOA believes incorrectly," Judge Morrison said flatly. "Mr. Brooks, you're an attorney. You should know better than to file a frivolous lawsuit based on a client's feelings rather than actual law." "Mr. Hanson, I assume you'd like to respond." Derek stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be brief because the defense's position is indefensible. Mr. Foster had no legal obligation to share his generator. The CC and Articus govern aesthetic and use restrictions on property, not emergency resource allocation. Furthermore, Mr. Foster provided substantial aid during the ice storm by sheltering 11 people in his home, including elderly residents and a family with a newborn infant. The suggestion that he acted selfishly or negligently is contradicted by the evidence. We've submitted sworn statements from the people he helped, and we're prepared to call witnesses if necessary. That won't be necessary. I've read the statements. Judge Morrison turned back to Brooks. Mr. Brooks, does the HOA have any evidence that Mr. Foster violated a specific enforceable provision of the CC and Artiques? The Community Interest Clause is not a blank check to commandeer private property. Dismissed. Motion granted. She banged her gavel. Furthermore, I'm awarding legal fees to Mr. Foster. The HOA will pay his attorney costs, and I strongly suggest that Ms. Davenport and the HOA board take a remedial course on HOA governance and limitations of authority before they find themselves facing more serious consequences. Patricia's face went through several shades of red and purple. She looked like she wanted to argue, but Timothy Brooks put a hand on her arm and shook his head. Outside the courthouse, Derek was grinning. That went even better than expected. Morrison just eviscerated their case. So it's over. The lawsuit is over. Your countersuit for harassment based on those retaliatory fines is still active, but I expect the HOA will want to settle that quickly to avoid more bad publicity. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you, Derek. I couldn't have done this without you. My pleasure. Cases like this are why I became a lawyer. HOAs need to be reminded that they're not dictatorships. I thought that would be the end of it. The lawsuit was dismissed. I'd been vindicated, and surely Patricia would slink away and focus her energy elsewhere. But Patricia Davenport was not someone who accepted defeat gracefully. 2 days after the hearing, I got a call from Richard Chen. Connor, you need to see this. Patricia is trying to get you removed from the neighborhood. What? She's circulating a petition to force you to sell your house and move. She's claiming you're a disruptive influence on the community. I drove over to Richard's house, where he showed me a printed petition that Patricia had been going door to door with. The petition claimed that I had demonstrated a pattern of non-compliance with community standards, created division among residents, and engaged in behavior detrimental to property values and neighborhood harmony. It called for the HOA to exercise its authority to require the sale of the property and removal of the residents in question. This is completely unhinged, I said. She can't actually force me to sell my house, can she? I don't think so, but she's getting signatures. Some people are signing it just to get her to leave them alone. I called Derek immediately. She absolutely cannot force you to sell your house, he confirmed. That's not a power HOAs have except in extremely limited circumstances involving abandonment or severe property neglect, and even then, it requires court approval. This petition is meaningless from a legal standpoint, but it's more evidence of harassment. Keep a copy of it. I took a photo of the petition and noticed that only about 15 of the neighborhood's 100-plus households had signed it. Still, the fact that Patricia was actively campaigning to drive me out of my home was disturbing. That weekend, I decided to fight back, not through lawyers or lawsuits, but through direct communication with my neighbors. I organized a neighborhood barbecue at the community park, sending out invitations to everyone in Pinewood Hills. The invitation was simple. Let's rebuild our community spirit. Food, games for kids, and a chance to talk about the future of our neighborhood. About 60 people showed up, which was a great turnout. I manned the grill, cooking burgers and hot dogs while Rachel set up games for the kids. People were hesitant at first, the divisions from the lawsuit still raw, but once the food started flowing and the kids were running around laughing, the atmosphere relaxed. I didn't bash Patricia or the HOA. Instead, I talked about what I loved about Pinewood Hills: the tree-lined streets, the good schools, the friendly neighbors. I shared my vision for a community where people helped each other voluntarily, not through mandates or lawsuits. Mrs. Henderson stood up and told everyone how I'd taken her in during the ice storm, how she'd been scared and cold until Rachel had tucked her into our sofa with warm blankets and hot soup. Margaret Chen talked about her health crisis and how the CPAP machine I'd powered had possibly saved her life. The Robinsons' baby gurgled happily in her mother's arms as they described the relief of having a warm place to care for their newborn during those terrible days. By the end of the afternoon, the mood had shifted. People were talking and laughing. Neighbors who'd been on opposite sides of the generator lawsuit debate were finding common ground. Several people approached me privately to apologize for signing Patricia's petition, saying they'd been misled about the situation. Patricia drove by the park twice during the barbecue but didn't stop or get out of her car. The following Tuesday, I received another certified letter, but this one wasn't from Patricia. It was from Howard Burke. "Dear Mr. Foster," it read, "on behalf of the Pinewood Hills HOA Board of Directors, I want to formally apologize for the lawsuit filed against you. After reviewing the situation more carefully and consulting with our attorney, the board has concluded that the legal action was inappropriate and not in the best interest of the community. The board has voted to reimburse you for all legal fees incurred in defending against the lawsuit, beyond what the court has already ordered. Additionally, all fines levied against you for noise violations and architectural issues have been rescinded and will not be enforced. We hope this resolves the matter and allows our community to move forward productively." The letter was signed by Howard, Sandra, and 2 other board members. Patricia's name was conspicuously absent. I called Howard, who sounded exhausted. "Connor, I owe you a personal apology too," he said. "Patricia convinced us that you were being unreasonable, but after the court hearing and talking to people about what really happened during the ice storm, Sandra and I realized we'd made a terrible mistake. We should have questioned Patricia's version of events more carefully." "I appreciate that, Howard. What's going on with Patricia?" he sighed. "She's been asked to resign as HOA president. The board voted 3-2 to request her resignation. If she refuses, we'll call for a special election to remove her." "How did she take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. She threatened to sue the HOA, which is ironic given the circumstances. But our attorney told her she'd lose and should accept the resignation gracefully. We're waiting for her response." Patricia did not resign gracefully. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood accusing the board of a coup orchestrated by Connor Foster and his allies, and claiming she was being persecuted for standing up for community values. The email was rambling and increasingly unhinged, mentioning conspiracies and coordinated attacks against her leadership. The board called for a special election, and Patricia was removed from her position by a vote of 73-18. A retired school principal named Douglas Martinez was elected as the new HOA president on a platform of common sense governance and community cooperation. I thought surely this was the end. Patricia had lost her lawsuit, lost her position, and lost the support of the neighborhood. She'd been thoroughly defeated on every front. But defeat only made her more desperate and irrational. 3 weeks after being removed from the HOA presidency, Patricia did something that crossed the line from vindictive to criminal. I woke up at 2 in the morning to a strange smell. It took me a moment to place it: gasoline. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Rachel, wake up. Something's wrong." We crept downstairs and the smell got stronger. I looked out the back window toward my generator and my blood ran cold. Someone was crouching next to the generator enclosure, pouring liquid from a red gas can. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while Rachel woke the kids. 911, what's your emergency? Someone is at my house trying to vandalize my generator. I think they're about to set it on fire. I need police immediately. I gave the dispatcher my address while keeping my eyes on the figure. In the moonlight, I could make out blonde hair and a familiar purple puffer coat. Patricia, I whispered. The dispatcher kept me on the line. Officers are 3 minutes away. Stay inside and away from windows. I watched in horror as Patricia pulled out a lighter. She was actually going to do it. She was going to try to burn down my generator, consequences be damned. But then everything was flooded with red and blue lights. 2 police cruisers pulled up, officers jumping out with flashlights and commands to put your hands up. Drop the lighter. Patricia froze, caught in the flashlight beams like a deer. The lighter fell from her hand. One officer kicked the gas can away while another cuffed Patricia's hands behind her back. I went outside after the officers waved me over. Mr. Foster, I'm Officer Ramirez. Can you tell me what happened? I explained everything. The lawsuit, the harassment, Patricia's escalating behavior. The other officer, Officer Thompson, examined the generator enclosure and the spilled gasoline. She dumped at least 2 gallons around your generator unit, Thompson said. If she'd lit it, this would have been a serious fire. Could have spread to your house. Patricia was screaming from the back of the police cruiser, yelling about how I'd destroyed her life and deserved to suffer. Her words were slurred, and I realized she'd probably been drinking. Has she been making threats against you? Ramirez asked. Not explicit ones, but she's been increasingly unstable. I have documentation of her harassment campaign. I told him about the petition to force me to sell my house and the emails she'd sent after being removed as HOA president. We're going to need statements from you and your wife. She's being arrested for attempted arson and criminal trespass. Given the premeditation and the danger to your family, I expect the DA will take this seriously. The fire department arrived to clean up the spilled gasoline and make sure nothing had been damaged. My neighbors started emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. By the time the police finished taking our statements and left with Patricia in custody, there were at least 20 people standing in my front yard in their pajamas and bathrobes. Douglas Martinez, the new HOA president, was among them. Connor, I am so sorry. I had no idea Patricia's behavior had escalated to this level. None of us did, Douglas. She needs help, professional help. She needs a jail cell, said Marcus Thompson angrily. She could have killed your whole family. The next morning, the story was everywhere again. HOA president arrested for attempted arson against resident she sued over generator, ran the headlines. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with reporters wanting statements. Derek called to check on us. Connor, are you and your family okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, we're pretty shaken up. I never thought Patricia would go this far. This changes everything. You need to get a restraining order immediately. I'm also recommending you pursue charges to the fullest extent. She could have killed you. Patricia was charged with attempted arson, criminal trespass, and reckless endangerment. Her bail was set at $50,000. According to news reports, she made bail after 2 days in jail, posted by her husband who looked absolutely mortified in the photographs. I filed for and received a temporary restraining order requiring Patricia to stay at least 500 feet away from my property and prohibiting any contact with me or my family. The hearing for the permanent restraining order was scheduled for 2 weeks later. At that hearing, Patricia showed up with a new attorney, looking haggard and defeated. She was dressed conservatively in a gray suit, her hair pulled back, wearing minimal makeup. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in a month. Her attorney requested leniency, claiming Patricia had been under extreme stress and had suffered a mental health crisis. He presented letters from a psychiatrist documenting that Patricia had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety disorder and was now in treatment. The judge, a different one this time, listened to both sides before granting the permanent restraining order. "Miss Davenport, you're fortunate that Mr. Foster's generator wasn't damaged and that no one was hurt. Your actions could have resulted in deaths, including your own if you'd successfully set that fire. I'm making this restraining order permanent. If you violate it, you will go to jail. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The criminal trial was set for 4 months later, in September. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Lisa Rodriguez, told us she was planning to seek jail time given the severity of the crime. "Cases like this need to send a message," she explained when we met with her to prepare for trial. HOA disputes, no matter how heated, cannot escalate to violence and property destruction. Miss Davenport needs to face real consequences, and other people need to see that there are limits to how far you can take neighborhood feuds. As we approached the trial date, Patricia's attorney reached out to Derek about a plea deal. Patricia would plead guilty to attempted arson and criminal trespass in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation. Derek asked me how I felt about that. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to see Patricia punished to the full extent of the law. She'd terrorized my family, tried to destroy my property, and could have killed us. But another part of me just wanted it to be over. A trial would mean reliving everything, more media coverage, more stress. "What would the plea deal look like?" I asked. 2 years in prison, 3 years probation after release, mandatory mental health treatment, and full restitution for any costs you incurred, including installation of security cameras and any increase in insurance premiums. "I want community service added, a lot of it, and I want her banned from serving in any HOA leadership position again." Derek relayed my requests. After some negotiation, the final deal was 2 years in prison, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service to be completed after release, mandatory mental health treatment, full restitution, and a permanent ban from HOA leadership roles as a condition of probation. Patricia accepted the deal. At the sentencing hearing in October, she was given a chance to make a statement. She stood at the defendant's table, looking small and broken. "I want to apologize to Connor Foster and his family for my actions. I let my anger and pride cloud my judgment, and I did something inexcusable. I could have hurt innocent people, including children. I'm ashamed of what I did, and I accept responsibility for my actions. I'm getting the help I need, and I hope someday to make amends for the damage I've caused." It sounded sincere, but I wasn't sure if it was genuine remorse or just a calculated statement to help her sentencing. Either way, the judge accepted the plea deal and sentenced Patricia accordingly. She was taken into custody immediately to begin serving her sentence. Life in Pinewood Hills slowly returned to normal after that. Douglas Martinez proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on actual community improvement rather than petty power games. The board revised the CC and Artiques to include clearer language about the limits of HOA authority and protections for residents' private property rights. They even added a Good Samaritan clause explicitly stating that residents who helped neighbors during emergencies couldn't be penalized or sued for doing so. The neighborhood came together in ways it hadn't before. We established a real emergency preparedness network, with voluntary resource sharing agreements and a communication tree for disasters. Several of my neighbors bought their own generators after seeing how useful mine had been. We organized regular community events, block parties, holiday celebrations, and a neighborhood watch program. The generator lawsuit, as it became known in local legal circles, was cited in several subsequent cases involving HOA overreach. Derek told me it had become a teaching case in some law schools about the limits of HOA authority and the importance of understanding legal boundaries before filing suit. Rachel and I still live in Pinewood Hills. Emma and Jake are older now in middle school, and they sometimes bring up that time the crazy HOA lady tried to burn our house down when discussing their most interesting childhood memories with their friends. We've tried to help them understand that Patricia was dealing with mental health issues and made terrible choices, but that most people are fundamentally good. I kept my generator, of course. It's still in its weatherproof enclosure beside the house, faithfully maintained and ready for the next emergency. I've used it 3 times since the ice storm, twice for shorter power outages, and once when we had a planned electrical panel upgrade. Each time, I'm grateful I invested in it, and each time, I remember that terrible week in February when it became the center of a neighborhood civil war. Patricia was released after serving 18 months of her 2-year sentence, getting time off for good behavior. She moved out of Pinewood Hills shortly after release, and I heard she and her husband relocated to somewhere in Colorado to be near their daughter. I hope she found peace and got the help she needed. Despite everything she put us through, I don't wish her ill. The last time I ran into Douglas Martinez, he told me that the HOA's insurance rates had skyrocketed after the lawsuit and Patricia's criminal case, costing the neighborhood thousands of dollars. But you know what, he said, it was worth it. We learned some important lessons about governance, about knowing our limitations, and about treating residents with respect. The old board ran the HOA like fiefdom. Now we run it like a service organization, which is what it should have always been. I think about Patricia sometimes, usually when I'm doing maintenance on my generator or when another storm rolls through and the power flickers. I think about how a reasonable request for help during a crisis spiraled into lawsuits, arrests, and someone nearly burning down my house. I think about how pride and the need to be right can poison a person's judgment until they are willing to commit crimes over a neighborhood dispute. But mostly I think about the neighbors who came together during that ice storm, how we took care of each other without any HOA mandate forcing us to do so. I think about Mrs. Henderson on my sofa, Margaret Chen breathing easily with her CPAP, baby Robinson sleeping peacefully in a warm room. That's what community is supposed to be. People choosing to help each other because it's the right thing to do, not because some association demands it or threatens fines and lawsuits. My generator still hums away when needed, keeping my family safe and comfortable. And if another ice storm hits, the neighbors know they're welcome to ride it out at my house, sharing warmth and resources the way communities have done for thousands of years, long before HOAs ever existed. That's a lesson worth remembering, and one that Patricia Davenport learned the hardest way possible. Sometimes the most important community service is knowing when to let people make their own choices about their own property, and trusting that most people, given the chance, will do the right thing without being forced. The lawsuit, the arrest, the media circus, all of it could have been avoided if Patricia had simply accepted that my generator was mine to use as I saw fit, and that opening my home to those in need was a more meaningful contribution than destroying my equipment would have been. But then again, if it had been easy for her to understand that, she never would have been the kind of person who became an HOA tyrant in the first place. Some people are so focused on control and compliance that they forget the human beings behind the houses they're trying to regulate. I'm just glad my family came through it safe, that justice was served, and that Pinewood Hills is now a genuinely better place to live. My generator is still there beside the house, ready for the next emergency, a quiet reminder that being prepared and being generous aren't mutually exclusive, no matter what Patricia Davenport thought.